Hello, I've intended on doing this video for quite some time uh, because of my deep desire to, share and converse with other African Americans that have actually found out where they're from via like DNA. Well, anyway, before I actually reveal my results, I want to talk about, my profound journey somewhat before I get to that part. Well, anyway, when I was a small child, uh, I always wanted to know where I was from. Always wanted to know where I was from. My parents told me that black people came from Africa, and my father even became, really specific with the region. My father mentioned West Africa, and I can remember a teacher saying West Africa and like a portion from like Southeast Africa, but mostly West Africa was always emphasized. But I was always told that there was no way of finding out what country or what tribe because of lost records and documents, and the plantation owners did everything to pretty much eradicate like any type of connection African Americans tried to hold on to the mother continent Africa. Well, anyway, as I mentioned earlier, as a kid, I always wanted to know where specifically in West Africa my ancestors came from, what country, like what tribe. I could even remember, being a small child talking to my cousins and, playing in the sand, talking about like, things of that matter, like have a little like, kid intellectual conversations and, wondering like where and almost trying to like imitate or make up a language, an actual language we might have been speaking, all of that. I can remember all of that. Well, anyway, when I was small, my parents got me these encyclopedias. They were called like Childcraft, and each encyclopedia had a different theme. And one of the encyclopedias I just gravitated toward just constantly, and the name of that one was About Us, and it was about various cultures and all over the world. And I remember seeing pictures in that encyclopedia, pictures of the people of Ghana specifically. And when I saw those photographs, I said, you know what, they kind of remind me of some people in my family. They really, really do. And I don't know, something inside of my mind, as a small child, and I'm thinking when this curiosity was stirred, it had to be sometime in elementary school, maybe around fourth or fifth grade. Around that time I was pretty young, fourth or fifth grade possibly. Well, anyway, like you know, I said like yeah. Well, anyway, in regard to the encyclopedia, looking at the photographs of the people from Ghana, my mom was just like, yeah, they kind of remind me of people in my family. And I thought within myself, like, possibly I could see photographs of maybe different African peoples, and, maybe if those people resemble people in my family, they could give me some clue of where my folk came from eventually, Well, anyway, I could remember as I got older, maybe around between middle school and high school, my aunts in Atlanta, Georgia, had three aunts on my mother's side. They, told me often Nigerians would come up to them and say, "Are you from Nigeria? Oh my goodness, you remind me of a sister back at home. Oh my gosh, I need to take you home and show you up to my people." They would tell me that, and I said, "Wow, that's interesting." I was just wondering, like, wow, my mom's side, I don't know. I wonder if we have roots in Nigeria, and that kind of stirred up a curiosity in me. What ended up happening when I was in high school, I checked out this book on Nigeria, and I started reading through the book. And one ethnic group stood out to me above all. There were, the Hausa in the book, the Igbo in the book, the Edo in the book, some other ethnic groups, but one ethnic group that really stood out to me were the Yoruba, in reference to my family, because they really really resembled my family. And the way the book kind of described the stereotypical Yoruba features. These high cheekbones, beautiful jet black skin, and really delicate slanted looking eyes. And I would see the some of the bronze statues in other books with the high cheekbones, the kind of like oval shaped face and the slanted eyes, what people would call probably like East Asian or Chinese type eyes. Well, anyway, like I said, you know what? These people do really remind me of my family, and they seriously do. In reference to the high cheekbones and slanted eyes, sometimes my family would just reference that to possible Native American ancestry or even Chinese ancestry, and not knowing where it originated from. But anyway, yeah, I say, wow, these Yoruba folk really kind of remind me of my mom's side of the family. These Nigerians in Atlanta that were talking about three different aunts. Might be on to something, and they would say these to my aunts in different locations, and my aunts don't distinctly look alike. If you kind of like just peer at them for a while, you say, okay, then I can see some connections. They're sisters, but they don't distinctly resemble each other in particular. But anyway, yeah, so I kind of started like doing research on the Yoruba people and kind of having some type of beliefs. These might be my kinfolk on my mom's side. Well, anyway, also I could recall looking in these very, very old encyclopedias my father had of these black and white photos of the Ashanti royal court in Ghana, and also getting a hold of the National Geographic, around about 1995. Yeah, in my high school library, and seeing a more recent photograph of the Ashanti royal court, photographs of Otumfuo Nana Opokuware, the present king of the Ashanti people during that time period. And I'm like, wow, I was just really stunned. Now, these folk remind me of my family. These folk remind me of the fabric I was cut from, seriously. And specifically my father's side of the family, distinctly my father's people heavily. My father's people, they really had a kind of distinct looks. And like, they really remind me of my father's people. And I was just like, I'm like, could I be related to the people in Ghana and also Nigeria? Particularly the Akan people. The Ashantis are a branch of the Akan people and the Yoruba people. And as I'm talking, the memory of being in my African American literature class in high school, reading tons of African folk tales, and also African folk tales that I checked out of the library, African folk tales in my African American literature book specifically, and African American folk tales I had checked out of the library, and I could recall feeling a strong connection to the folk tales of the Yoruba and the Akan people. And inside of my mind, I would try to approach the folk tales in a very like non-biased, detached manner, and just see, maybe the people whose psychology I connect with, maybe the people's sense of wit or sense of humor I connect, might be a hint of who I'm related to. And I've recently, maybe not recently, but maybe 3 years ago, heard this term ancestral memory, and it's just interesting. That was way back in high school, and I was kind of like tapping into some type of portion of that, and I was just like, maybe whoever folktales I connect with might be a sign of the people I'm related to strongly. And I remember falling in love with the Yoruba and the Akan folk tales, the Yoruba of Nigeria, the Akan of Ghana. And I'm like, I said, I don't know, this might be a hint of the people I'm related to. And also, I could remember reading the folk tales from the Fon people of Benin and feeling some type of kindred spirit, but it was not as strong as what I felt from reading the Yoruba and the Akan. The Fon was like kind of like coming close home, but it wasn't hitting that, I guess you would say, subconscious spot. It wasn't touching me in that spiritual place. I'm like, no, I don't feel it as strong as the Yoruba and the Akan, their folk tales. Well, anyway, fast forward. So I finally go to college, University of South Carolina, and I can recall meeting Africans, and also at college and outside of college, Africans from all over Senegal, Togo, Benin, Ghana, Angola, specifically West Africans, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea, where else? Gabon, Cameroon. Just me, and I would ask them, where do you think I share the bulk of my ancestry from in West Africa? And consistently, many of them would say Ghana. Many, even the Ghanaians would say that, Ghana. And I remember even talking to a guy, and this guy, a friend of mine named Kofi, and he was Fante and Ga, from the Fante and Ga ethnic groups of Ghana. And I asked him that same question, and he said, "You remind me a lot of the people in Ghana." He said specifically the Fante people, and the Fante are a branch of the Akan. And I'm like, okay then, wow. So what ends up happening, I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina for a while, and there are a lot of West Africans that live in Raleigh, North Carolina, the Research Triangle Park area, and I would converse with the West Africans there and ask them questions. And but before I go on to the time period I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, I'm about to forget a very profound part of this journey. I remember getting into a taxi cab in Columbia, South Carolina, and when I got into the taxi cab, this guy started speaking, and it kind of like, I don't know, I was kind of, I cannot describe it. I was speechless or stunned. Like when the guy spoke, every time he spoke, I felt something very, very familiar. I said, something in my gut kind of rumbled, and I was like, where is this guy from? Is he from the West Indies, or maybe Charleston, South Carolina, on the coast where Gullah is spoken? And I'm from South Carolina, and I'm from the coastal area where Gullah is spoken. And I'm like, where is he from? I'm like, dang. And I just listened. I would just listen, and I said, where are you from? And he said, I'm from Africa. I said, where? He said, I'm from Ghana. I'm Fante. And I was just like, I was kind of moved, because I thought about what the guy had told me back in college, the University of South Carolina. And, the guy said he was Fonte, the taxi cab driver. And he said he was Fonte from Ghana. I'm like, wow. So every time he spoke, something rumbled in my gut. It was a familiar feeling. Like whatever was in him was inside of me. I could not describe it. And I say I'm either a distant relative of his, or either like, that's the ethnic group I have a strong ancestry from. So anyway, like, later on I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, and I met a lot of West Africans there, and I could recall like, being at my sister's place, and my sister had a neighbor. And her neighbor was African. And when the guy spoke, I had a similar incident happen to me, with the Fonte guy from Ghana, the Akan Fonte guy from Ghana. And I'm like, okay then. And this guy tells me he's Yoruba from Nigeria. And I'm like, okay then. Wow, because, I had a similar occurrence that had happened to me with the Akan guy, in Columbia, South Carolina, the Akan Fonte guy. And the Fonte, as I mentioned, are a branch of the Akan. And, and the Yoruba guy would speak, and I'm like, and I would be kind of moved. I felt that feeling in my stomach. And I can remember, going to a church in Raleigh and coming in contact with people I didn't know where they were from. And this church had a lot of Africans and people from the Caribbean, all over Africa, East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa, Central. And, I remember seeing these people, and I say, they remind me of my family. And I didn't know where they were from. And I asked them, and they said they were Yoruba from Nigeria. Well, anyway, like I said, by that time, I had come to strongly believe, I knew my mom's side had a lot of Yoruba ancestry from Nigeria. And my dad's side had Akan ancestry from Ghana. I had, developed those beliefs, and I would tell my friends that back in college, talk to my family members about that, and it's just kind of like, I just knew deep in my heart that, like, my mom's side in particularly my mom's mother's side, because I had a strong connection to my mom's mother side, particularly my grandmother, and also my dad's father's side. Like, though my dad's mom's side and my dad's father's side, those sides always kind of reminded me of the sides that were what I would stereotype as having the most African DNA or ancestry, etc. They kind of reminded me of African people more so. And my dad's mother's side, or my mother's father's side, because my mother's father died before I was born, we were not as close to my mother's father side. So I knew about my mother's father side, but we were not as in close relationship, except through my grand aunt and grand uncle who would come from Miami and Washington D.C. to visit, etc. Well, anyway, like I found out that Ancestry DNA testing was available through this company called African Ancestry, through the program called African American Lives in 2006. And I was amazed. I'm like, wow. I said, I gotta take this test. And finally, I was able to take the test. And finally, I was able to take the test. And I sent my results in. I did my mom's side first. I sent my results in. And I was just, I don't know, wondering like what would it come back. I felt it would be Yoruba from Nigeria, but I didn't even really care whether I was right or not. Like, I just wanted to be African. I mean, I would just go on the internet and look at a map of Africa and just just dream about what my results might be. And I knew like the bulk of the slave trade concentrated in West Africa, but I would just look all over the map and just maybe if I got a weird surprise coming out of Kenya or Tanzania, I would still be really happy as long as it came back African. I was just like, okay, oh my goodness. So finally, it was coming close to the time. I called customer service, African Ancestry, asking. They would say, we can't reveal that over the phone, but what we can tell you, it is African. So I was happy about that. Well, anyway, the results came back. And I actually have the results in my hand. And drum roll. I'm gonna read it. It says, "Dear Mr. White," my last name White, "it is with great pleasure that I report our matriarch clan." Oh my goodness, my tongues are getting tied. I don't know, reliving that excitement. That our matriarch clan analysis successfully identified your maternal genetic ancestry. The mitochondrial DNA sequence that we determined from your sample shares ancestry with the Yoruba people of Nigeria today. I was just like, oh my goodness, I was blown away. And it was just amazing. And this what they said also. Your sequence similarity measure is 98.9%. This means that your sequence is 98.9% the same as sequences from the Yoruba in Nigeria today. I'm like, oh my goodness. I was just blown away. I was just like taken aback. I was like, wow. My entire life, like God is, I don't know, has been showing this to me because I really wanted to know. And I thought about how I always gravitated toward the cultures of Cuba and Brazil and the African diaspora. In Cuba and Brazil, those two nations received the most of all the Yoruba slaves that were brought to the New World. They received the most of them, Cuba and Brazil in particular. And I deeply love Cuba and Brazil, culturally, everything. But anyway, but I was just stunned. I was just like, wow, like I'm Yoruba. And what was so profound, such I guess you'll say a moment of destiny and fate. African Ancestry did not know my date of birth, and they did the lab analysis on my birthday, December 13th. So I have a certificate with the lab analysis performed on the date of December 13th. So it was like a rebirth for me. So I was moved by that. So I finally did my dad's side. I did my mom's side in 2007. I did my dad's side in 2008. So I finally did my dad's side. And my sister said, "You think you can guess daddy's also?" And I said, if it's not specifically the Ashanti of Ghana, it's going to be the Akan. And I knew we came from that ethnic group. The Ashanti, as I mentioned, are a branch of the Akan. They are a part of the Akan family, the Akan cultural group. Well, anyway, I said, Akan of Ghana. She said, okay, we'll see. So I did the DNA test, sent in my sample, after I did the Q-tips swabbing. And, I got kind of like, over anxious and excited once again. So I started calling African Ancestry to find out what the results were. And the guy said, we can't reveal that information over the phone, as they usually say. And he said, but you think you can guess it? He told me it's African, but you think you can guess it? I said, I said, the Ashanti of Ghana, and him having knowledge of, the African cultures and African history. He knew that the Ashanti were a branch of the Akan. And I can tell I was right, because on the phone, he seemed like he was stunned. He didn't say much, but, he felt like he was kind of like astounded. And I say Ashanti of Ghana, and he couldn't give it away, but he almost did through his reaction a little bit. But anyway, I got the results. I got the results back. And the result says, it is with great pleasure that I report that our patroclan analysis successfully identified your paternal genetic ancestry. The Y chromosome DNA that we determined from your sample shares ancestry with the Akan people in Ghana today. And you know what was so awesome? The DNA test results had already been sent out in the mail, because I had them, I had my package, FedEx. They had already been sent out in the mail before I spoke to the guy on the phone. And but anyway, yeah, they had already been sent out in the mail before I spoke to the guy on the phone. Anyway, yeah, but the Akan people in Ghana, today. And what was awesome, it says the sequence similarity measure is 100%. It says this means that your sequence is 100% the same as sequences from Akan people in Ghana today. And I was just, wow. I was just moved that I was right about both lineages on my mom and my dad's side. And it goes to show the Yoruba proverb is true. It says, no matter how far a stream flows, it never forgets its source.